Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarajo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to figure out what the future is in store for smart buildings and the smart building industry. We are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you wonder who we are. Just a reminder that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And let's make this as interactive as possible using the Zoom chat. We'd like to get as much feedback as we can muster. And if you want any of the links or any of the info on this deck, it is also available on mondaylive.org. Head over there. This being January, we're spending the 2 weeks in January anticipating the Smarter Summit, which is happening now this coming Sunday in Chicago. I will talk more about that in a moment. So that's really the focus of today and last week as well. We did this as well. So really what we want to do today is sort of finalize the agenda and just sort of run through it again to get feedback. But before we get into that, hand it over to Ken. Going on, Ken? You're muted. I'm
muted. I just noticed I was muted. I just took a call there. So sorry about that. It's showtime. That's my message. Come on, guys. We got to get going. We've all got all our programs here. We're just about all together. By this time next week, the Smarter Summit will be over. And we'll be gathering the information for our recap of the summit. So we're excited about that. So we're excited that the agenda is coming together. We did a post with C4SB. I recommend we do another post when any changes we make to the agenda today. I want to thank all of our advertisers that have basically made our program at AHR possible. We have over 55 speakers this year, which is just unbelievable. It's always been my goal to get the whole industry on one page, and like as I'm jesting, this is as close as we've ever come. So excited about that. Yes, not too much to say. Just want to make sure everybody goes out to the Lawnmark booth and sees this interoperability in a box, seeing the demo. And the other one is Anto has added a program on Wednesday there, the IBB workshop on Wednesday, 11 to 2. So that is interesting as well. I think that's a good chance to get out, get a hands-on working of the IBB. I'm hoping that Anto will give us a little bit of a spin on that, where that's at. So without further ado, back to you, Anto.
Yeah, on that IBB workshop, let's just sort of comment on that now here. The idea is that after the summit and the 2 days, Monday, Tuesday at the show floor, there'll be a lot of IBB related conversations and cloud native conversations. So we thought we'd do something to try and catch that conversation and try and sort of have another opportunity before we all leave Chicago, and that's the idea of doing the Wednesday. We can use it to answer any questions, discuss any issues, whether it's technical or business. Just take another opportunity before we wrap up the AHR. So that's the purpose of that. Thank you for bringing it up, Ken. A couple of things here. The first is last week was CES. I think we've all sort of seen all of the different stuff that's coming out of Vegas from last week. But this caught my eye. This is an article in The Verge, and it was really sort of making the argument that really the thing that came out of CES this year was interoperability. It's about the fact that it's obviously, we're talking about residential homes. That's actually suffered from the lack of interoperability, and Matter came along a couple of years ago to try and standardize it. And the sense that I get from this article is that they feel that the industry is starting to grapple with the fact that if they don't make all of their products interoperable, then it ain't going to go anywhere. So I thought that's just an interesting thing. Obviously, it's not in our domain necessarily, but it's in many ways it's very similar technology. So that's what was interesting. And the second part is that I bring this up every 3 months because the report comes out every 3 months, which is really this analysis of what CEOs talk about in their annual meetings or quarterly meetings. And I actually have it on the next slide, much bigger, so you can actually read it. And if you recall last quarter, the previous quarter, the big thing was AI. AI was all over the top and to the right, which is kind of means that that's what CEOs are focused about. And here you see AI is hardly there. It's all about geopolitical uncertainty and economic concerns and supply chain. And, that has sort of evolved, that sort of changed in the last 3 months. So I thought that's kind of worth noting here. Anybody have any comment on this?
Given what's going on in the Middle East, in particular, and the effect on shipping, I'm not surprised as a quarterly report. Any large institution has got to be concerned about ability to get their product through the supply chain, given what's happening. So it's I think this report is very much a snapshot, relatively speaking, a snapshot in time. So I don't think they are necessarily less interested in AI. They're just more interested in political stability, or instability, as the case may be. Out of necessity,
The thing I worry about, if they're thinking and talking about that, they're not thinking and talking about technology and acquisition of new technology and so forth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not a good time
things
for
get delayed.
anybody to take it. Not a good time for anybody to take anything that they would consider risky.
Right.
Yeah.
I brought Glenn on. He's going to
Sorry,
join
I'm
us
waiting.
today. That's okay. No worries. You see this thing on the screen. Do you have any comments on this?
The nearer we get to the election, the more the wacky the the thinking will be, I think. Yeah, I think, New Year, everybody's worrying about what the economy is going to do and what the election will do to the economy and everything else associated with that. So I guess, yeah, AI must drop a little bit in that story, even as big and much heralded as it has been.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just an observation, the trend that we try and cover here. And our focus is obviously on the Smarter Summit. If you have not registered for the summit, please do. I'll put the link on chat just in case you need it. Rick, do you want to add anything? We've been doing quite a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, it's coming together nicely. The Smarter Summit agenda is out. We've got a pretty good roster of speakers and presentations, and you can look at the agenda online, and it's slowly getting filled in. Yeah, I think we're going to make good on our intent of showing what things have been underway and what we've been working on to help remove some barriers to adoption of smarter interoperable building technologies. So the goal is a little bit different than last year. The goal is to show what work has been done and what paths have been paved, and I think it's going to be a fun and interesting day, half a day.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. So moving on, the link board as always, it's just there. Any other new news or thoughts anybody want to share before we move on? Hearing none. So let's get back to the Smarter Summit. There's really nothing else to talk about other than the Smarter Summit. This is the document that I shared last week. And what you see is the revised agenda from the input we got and out of the discussion last week. And this is now on the smartersummit.org. If you head over there, and we want to sort of just go through this with maybe some new eyes and new perspective. Rick, do you want to start with this sort of this vision session, the first session?
Yeah, and Glenn's on here and Kennedy's not, but this first session to be able to sort of talk about how we got to where we are and to kind of review and recap sort of the last couple of years of getting feedback and then kind of getting some things done. And as I just said a minute ago, this first session will be to kind of set the stage for showing the things that have been worked on by these committees and by these volunteers, and also to sort of reframe the sort of the present status of what's happening in the world of OT and IT. And we're excited, like for instance, that Kennedy's going to be able to be part of this kickoff to be able to help describe what her journey's been over the past couple of years, and how now she works for a company that is all about writing code for this digital transformation of OT industries. And so she works for a company that specializes in migrating code to new environments, and that couldn't be more applicable to what what we're going to be trying to talk about, and trying to make the point of now's the time. We've been talking about digital transformation and the benefits of it for a long time. Now's the time to actually do something about it, and the technology is there to be able to do it. And Glenn may want to talk a little bit about what he wants to kick off with as well. Yes, Glenn?
You're muted.
Someday
There
I'll
you go.
learn how to do all this really well. Smoothless, seamless. Thank you, Rick and Anto and everybody. I'm looking forward to participating. I strongly concur and support this move forward. It's the tools are in hand. Let's go use them and move this ball down the field and do things with all of this. And I think there are other challenges that come once you get moving on this kind. If we start doing things together in a more collaborative, cooperative fashion, then we can start worrying about really what are bigger goals, which is how do we get everybody to share data in the future and drive an understanding of the economic pie gets enlarged by cooperation, and that opportunity is well worth the all the risks that people have assigned to moving away from walled gardens and closed systems and so forth. But I've said this a million times, but I'm back to my old preschool analogy. Before I got into regular school, we went to nursery, and people would teach us, we share because we care, and that's what we need to do with data in this kind of collaborative environment moving forward. And I would like personally to just push on the idea of that, this is really not a binary story in the sense of I do or don't cooperate, or I do or don't collaborate. I think it's more one of what I've always called creative contention, which is moving away from closed systems and protected product portfolios and walled gardens and such. I think is risky, and people don't like taking risky steps forward. But I think once people realize that the pie is bigger and that the collaboration can drive lots of new ways for differentiation besides being closed, I think people should just view this all as these are contentious decisions that people don't always agree on, and people have various conflicts that arise because of all this. But if you view the contention creatively, I think moving forward on collaboration in general and looking for new ways to differentiate will be super important to the whole effort. But I'm an enthusiastic promoter and happy to be a part of the group going forward.
So, Glenn, this is Steve. Good
Hi,
to see you again.
Yeah.
One of the main things in the vision piece here that I'm hoping gets well communicated is this transition into this technological transition that's underway. and it's a transition that has little to do with our industry. It has everything to do with the way IT is operating today and continues to evolve, which is, into this cloud native type architectures. And so the couple of points, one is that our industry needs to catch up and get on board. And there's not really a choice here, because it's not like the IT industry is going to change their mind about data going to the cloud, and
Right.
and all of us, whether we're just working from our house or we're using it for entertainment, all computing is now over the internet effectively, and it's all being orchestrated and hosted and manipulated and shared through cloud-based architectures and applications. That's
sure.
just a fact. And so the vision piece here, of which you're participating, I really want to try to get that point across to the audience very clearly, that we're not saying this because we just think it's cool. This is out of necessity.
Yes.
And
Yes.
but the benefits are going to be wonderful in so many ways, not just for differentiation, but it becomes the basis, I believe, for solving the data problem that you alluded to earlier.
Right.
Because the mechanisms for sharing data at the cloud level have graduated, maybe that's the right word, but they've evolved in such significant ways that the barriers and the hurdles that we've had to overcome historically it's very different now, and we're going to be able to leverage those capabilities that the IT industry has led on, frankly, in terms of data sharing. So that's, at least from my perspective, I'd like to see the vision piece really drive home those points, so that the audience realizes, yeah, okay, whether you're a supplier, you're a systems integrator, or a building owner, now's the time to be asking for it, to be designing for it, and to be installing it and implementing it.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, this goes to just basic foundational concepts about the way technology evolves, which I think is what you're raising. I think one is, IT is everywhere. It's not like it's restricted or configured in particular ways in particular parts of the world in a manner that slows it down or inhibits its ability to continue to evolve and drive innovation. So, essentially, it doesn't matter what sector of the economy you're in, you're eventually going to be subject to the same competitive and technical rules that the rest of the economy is subject to, from IT, et cetera, software, architecture, and so on. But I think more importantly, as we talked about last year, everything in the economy is, at least in my view, comes down to all systems are really just complex adaptive systems. And I've always used the car, the vehicle, as the easiest and stupidest example, which is, the brakes don't work with the powertrain, and that doesn't work with the cockpit, and all those subsystems harmoniously interacting together. I could kill myself or kill the person on the street in front of me if I'm driving. And, so whether it's a supply chain, a factory, a building, a whole city, a transportation system, all these systems are evolving to much more interdependency, and all that IT and software technology is just making that happen. And so it's not a choice. It's just a question of how you're going to participate as that evolution continues. And I think that's the message you need to get across, is that this is not really a choice as much as it's a phenomenon and a default state that all these
I like your phrase, how you're going to participate. I think that really nails it, right? Yep.
Well, and I think this gets back to something I alluded to a little bit earlier, which is the models, if you just look at the business models and the competitive models and structure and evolution of the general IT space or lots of other spaces outside the building space, basically what happened was people gave up on being closed and moved to new business models and new means of differentiation as a result of that. And no longer do I rule or control a customer by the scope of my product basket or portfolio or whatever, and the bunch of buying behaviors, the thing that differentiates me. And all that will give way to driving innovation much more as the differentiation and the kind of value delivery and level of that value and the impact of that value on the customer. And so as more and more of these systems move to this interdependency, people become more collaborative. People will just have to find new ways to think about how they differentiate, how they provide value, and how they drive impact.
Do we need to be considerate to those that maybe are not seeing this as clearly as others? Putting a provocative question here, because I mean, clearly not everybody sees this, and which is fine. The world is just full of different people. That's what makes the world go round.
There might be some need to do that, but I think there's a bigger need to show that work has been done to show the path. We're not starting from scratch. The path has been started, and models and examples are here for people to follow. So this is not a whiteboard exercise or just our imaginations. Now there might be other people who want to debate whether it's a good thing, but we're kind of say, especially from the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, we're going to say we think this is the interoperability is the way to go. So we went ahead and started getting to work and showing examples and bringing people together to get a path cleared. Other people can debate whether it was necessary or the right thing or whatever, but we went ahead and did this work to be able to show that the momentum is already started.
One of the things that we need to think about, it's not just that others don't know about this, it's also that others will actively campaign against this.
Right.
So, that I don't know how we want to integrate that into our discussion. Or if we need to, maybe we just ignore that. I did along the same line. Last time we talked about this, we talked about creating some kind of a timeline visual for this. And I can't remember who it was, but sent out a link that had a slide.
Scott.
Yeah, I thought that was really pretty good because it dealt with a couple of the core reasons why the IT industry kind of evolved over time, including, the one that hit home with me the most was, listen, how we develop software and platforms is just fundamentally changed. And now it's this continuous code development of, tweak and release kind of thing, that DevOps style. I think it'd be important to have that as one of the points when we get to, or a visual when we get to this kind of a discussion. Look, it's not just us. The world is going this way. Technology is going this way. This is how technical platforms are built these days. Why would we not expect our industry to follow suit?
Yeah.
Agreed.
The one thing that is in this description is, I think it's really Ken that started this, is the comparing what we're going through to the emergence of the DDC back in the 70s and 80s. Ken, do you want to reflect on that, given what we've been talking about here? And
were you asking me,
that's
Jan?
still
Yeah, actually.
no, I was Ken
Okay,
Sinclair.
that's fine. Yeah. Good.
Sorry. Yeah. Actually,
No, I'll ask you
so
in a minute.
I
I'll
see
ask
it-
you in a minute, Glenn.
Yeah, I see a great parallel to it, kind of living through a whole bunch of eras and growing up in the DDC. We had the same thing as we started to attack the 4 major control companies and started to take away their market share with DDC systems. And one of the kingpins was the BACnet movement, which sort of opened up all those protocols and opened the floodgate to allow a whole bunch of DDC manufacturers to actually interact and solve a big problem. I was a consultant back in those days, and I would get proposals from the majors where they would offer us up to $50,000 off a major project if we did not accept BACnet. There was direct resistance. They did not want BACnet. They wanted to control, mostly because of the service and the aftermarket was the reason that they did not want to go that direction. And they also saw the potential problem. But of course, once that open standard opened up the floodgates, then everything changed. And so what I've done is I just poked out a little article on the metamorphosis of all of this, and the fact that once we touch cloud native, we too change. We don't become, once you start believing in the philosophies of it, and even in sleepy old automated buildings for 25 years, once we put it in the cloud, it became a completely different animal than it was when it was basically on a server and a laptop. So it's that whole change is a radical change. And yeah, it's going to take some head shaking. There's going to, good point, Tracy. There's going to be people who will be politicking it away. So really the DDC industry has now evolved to be the pneumatic industry, and the cloud native industry is the new kid on the block that is going to change everything. The other thing that is coming with cloud native is a whole bunch of new standards. And even BACnet is at risk, as is Haystack and all of our traditional standards. So anyway, I think that's an interesting observation, that it's just another era, but it's going to be a different era. It's going to change the people, and people will hang their hats on it. And the people that are early to it and support it, I think they will create an industry. Underneath that will still be the DDC industry, which will be like the pneumatic industry was underneath the DDC industry. It'll still be there, and because of the time lag in the industry, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen.
You reminded me when you started talking about that. So I was thinking about the business resistance, the economic resistance. People want to continue to sell what they have. But you reminded me, talking about DDC, when I was first starting into this industry, and I was an intern at a paper mill in college. It was right about that time where things were getting switched over from pneumatic to DDC. And this was an instrumentation department, so it wasn't a controls department per se. It wasn't engineers. These were, either on the job kind of people, or they had electronics certificates or Navy or armed services training or something. But I remember how much they loved to sit around the shop and bitch and complain about how stupid DDC stuff is, and why does the world need anything like that. And it was a big old joke to them. There's just this momentum that we'll have to overcome in our industry, So thanks for that memory, Ken.
Yeah. Well, it's going to hit right at a lot of the folks on this screen. It's going to change. It's going to change their business model for sure. It's transitionary. It's significant. It's just a different way of thinking and a different way of doing, and that's what we're all saying. And as I pointed out, we have a session on cloud native, and the speakers are from Brazil, UK, and Eastern Europe. What does that tell you? It tells you that maybe we as North America are not leaders in cloud native, but we need to be.
Ben, any thoughts on that point?
I would echo everything everybody else said, but I mean, to some extent, I think the story is, it's amazing how long that these walls have remained. Given that, this is probably not the most politically correct analogy to use, but it's like if all this new technology are a bunch of Indians and the building OEMs are the wagon train. They've been surrounded for a long time, taking a lot of arrows, and they don't even know it. This train's out of the station, and I mean, you can look at DDC, look at the evolution of Ethernet in the industrial space. I mean, there are all pockets of this stuff going on everywhere, and because the way these architectures will be required to work on a performance basis, they will become more distributed, which means by default they'll have to be more collaborative and based on more interoperable standards. And if it is an inevitability and the train's out of the station, the bigger question is who's moving faster to essentially figure out what they're doing with this if it changes all the rules. Matters the most.
Actually, another point I want to make is what's happening is the new people filling our industry, they come with knowledge of cloud native and no knowledge of our industry. So I think that's going to very much speed the transition because they know they do everything on their phone. They don't even use PCs. You know, they find, actually my daughter made a comment that she'd never used Word.
Wow.
Wow.
There we go.
That hit me hard. I said the editor just works like Word.
That's an auto carbon dating moment.
So I mean, that's the transition we're going to is people have worked online. People have I don't know, you see the kids in the cribs in the carts in the store, and they're basically playing their soother is a smartphone.
Right.
So you're saying we're just a bunch of instrumentation technicians.
Yeah, that's right. We're like our old pneumatic friends. I mean, my pneumatic friends, because I came from pneumatics and then grew up in that environment, they told me I was crazy. It's like
I just
get
looked
to
at
learn how
our
to work with my compressor, I guess.
I just looked at my archive, and the first time we wrote publicly in somebody's white paper about cloud native was 2014.
wow.
That's 10 years.
Mhm. Yeah, we have some articles on ours. There's a lot of folks were seeing it coming.
So
You're just-
let's move to the next segment of the summit, which is kind of obviously related. It's everything follows, which is about procuring and specifying the other way around. Jim, do you want to speak a little bit about what this is all about and your thoughts on this? And we'll also add a new participant of this segment as well.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about specifying and procuring as a big problem in the industry for many years. And as a group, as Monday Live and C4SB, we've done a lot of work, and we wanted to highlight the Smarter Stack and the Div 2525 framework documents to show people that, it isn't all bluster, but there's actually some substance behind the rhetoric as to a series of tools and a way of thinking about getting to specifying interoperable buildings. And I think that, fundamentally what we're looking at is a sea change as to how people think about procurement, right? In our industry, everything has been based on bid and spec and consulting engineers trying to divine everything that the building will need over its life cycle, 30 years, 100 years, whatever it might be. And we know that as we've converged with IT, that's completely impractical because IT time constants move on a 3-year basis, and our industry moves on at most a 20-year basis. So those two things don't sync up, and specifically financially, owners don't think about the operating cost associated with maintaining these interoperable systems in the future. I'm talking about cybersecurity. I'm talking about as IT advances, these systems need to evolve with them. So fundamentally, that's what we're talking about. And Pete Scanlon, who has quite a lot of experience in specifying and has actually created some products to do so, will be joining me. And Chris Battisti, who's the excuse me, the controls lead for the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters will be joining to present some ideas there as well. So Anto, is that enough of a kickoff, or you want some more
Yeah,
commentary?
I think that's great. Would love to have a conversation about this. From the thoughts. This seems to be kind of the core of it from a business perspective, right? You've got to be able to sell stuff.
Exactly. And, you know, if you look at how a big organization like the U.S. military, and the Corps is the controls lead for the entire DoD, you know, they understand that we're not in a world where they're going to bid things once and it's going to be the end of this, it's going to be the solution for the lifetime of the asset. They realize that things like cybersecurity are ongoing operations. And as we converge with IT, they're ongoing. So I think what you're seeing is, I think Chris will bring this to light somewhat as to how they're thinking about changing how they do things at a fundamental level. And I think it's very important for the commercial and institutional sectors to go through that same evolution.
Might be worth noting, Jim, that this, the other industry that was probably as prehistoric about all of this as the building space was the car industry. I mean, they did a horrible job in the early years of trying to have any kind of synchronicity with electronic and software, anything in that vehicle, right? I mean, it was just, we're metal benders. That's what we do. And if you look at the evolution of that over time, they got better and better at it because it actually made a difference in the user experience. And, obviously the emergence of Tesla and the whole rigmarole around software-defined vehicles just goosed the story. And then Tesla's valuation just kind of brought the whole thing home.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, Glenn. And if you look at, first automotive manufacturing, which adopted this stuff in the 1980s in terms of digital controls and network controls, and moving our way into the car itself, I totally agree. But I think the key thing there is, you mentioned that it's really the consumer. People saw the value of having these integrated systems that actually work.
Yeah.
Was it the CAN network that made the big shift?
CAN bus in one way, yeah.
CAN bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
CAN bus.
I
Like
think
I said-
I think that CAN had a big effect. There was an American standard called J1850, which competed with CAN for a long time, and I think that as the automotive industry was arranged as an oligopoly, it was much easier for proprietary technology to grow up in the silo of each independent manufacturer.
Well,
The
then
question is how you bridge that.
that and then the vacuum of user experience we would describe in the building systems business has an impact on competitiveness. I don't know what to say. But good
Be nice,
point.
Glenn.
All right. You're going to turn me into Dr. No soon.
So Jim, knowing that cloud native architectures are not widespread in our industry right now, right? And we're trying to make the case for the industry moving in that direction. How do we transition the specification portion now, this year, next year? The cyber is in some ways generic, and I think it's pretty well understood in terms of how to what the key issues are, both in the building and in and out of the cloud. But from a system architecture standpoint, and from a data accessibility and modeling perspective, where do you think we should steer this discussion in terms of evolving our specs in the next 12 to 24 months?
I think it's a basic story, Steve, and it starts with the fundamental words as a service, right?
Mhm.
Because right now, we've talked about lots of business models. I've been trying to prosecute them for more than 20 years,
Right.
where we basically sell technology as a service, consulting as a service, other things as a service, and our industry is very allergic to that. And it's allergic to it primarily because the money enters into our buildings in the construction process, the old-fashioned Construction Specification Institute bid, where everything has been capitalized. Whether it's IBB or any of the other technologies we're talking about, it's incumbent upon us to help educate both the consulting community and the owner to look at as-a-service models rather than capital upfront models.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And use 25-25 to insist on it.
Right. Rick, you have a lot of point of views on this. What do you think in terms of how we get that software as a service, product as a service, energy management as a service, analytics as a service? How do we make that transition with owners that you see?
I think there's a lot of good models out there for how it's already being adopted. And again, we just have to highlight the big picture benefits of, beyond energy management, beyond energy savings, the benefits that come from, a more holistic look at total cost of ownership and there are a lot of models for how procurement is already being done. And I hope that the Corps of Engineers, your friend from the Corps of Engineers, and maybe some people in the audience that are going to be at the summit that are already doing managed services or ESCO procurements where everything is bundled in and the benefits are very clearly articulated in terms of total cost of ownership and energy and operational and life cycle savings. But you can't make good decisions about all of those things without data. So, that's why we've been spending so much time on saying, you can't make good decisions if you're in the dark. You don't really know where you even are relative to your spend and your total cost. And then if you did want to make better decisions and enact, more highly optimized real estate in one way or another, you've got systems that don't work together. So, a lot of people have just thrown up their hands. So getting data architectures that can allow for better, more, data-enabled decisions is a key part of that. And then let's leverage the business models that we know about for giving people the ability to either, make or buy or, lease or purchase or as a service or, however it fits for their financial model.
I think what I see is one of the difficulties is finding an intelligent counterparty at the customer to have this conversation with, right? Because we've got a fundamental education problem across the industry. I agree there's certain verticals where we can get by, but the buying behavior at large doesn't give us somebody to have that conversation with a lot of the time. And I'm not trying to call all of our customers stupid. What I'm trying to say is that there's actually a divide between the people that are doing capital projects and building buildings and the people that operate them. So in order to cross that divide, cross that chasm, we need to have counterparties on the operating side that have some input into how buildings are planned and built to start out with. Sorry.
That's good. But I think we do need to move on unless.
Okay. Can I add just one thought, and maybe this will transition us a little bit, but listening to you guys, I'm thinking about the other industries that we're keep throwing out there and how that ties back to the business model, Jim, in particular. If you think about your phone, or in my case, I have a electric vehicle that gets not constant, but regular over-the-air updates that includes new features and so forth. I can't imagine having a phone that doesn't get a new OS every year or two, or my car, stopping for any update services on my car. And both of those industries, 10 years ahead of when all that started happening, if you would have asked somebody, would have told you that will never happen. Why do you need to update a phone, right? Or why do you need to update a car? And so there's a heavy value proposition component in this whole thing that is probably more important than the specification piece of it, even. In the end, when this really takes off, once we get to the point where we're delivering and able to deliver that true value proposition, and why, as a service is important, that's a critical piece of that, right? Bringing and continuing to escalate value throughout the process, and which ties back to what I said earlier about the whole DevOps, looking at development as DevOps, as opposed to I'm gonna create a platform and launch it and it's done. And we got to get to that point.
Okay, so the next segment is the IBB, which is essentially, most of that is a demo of the IBB. And essentially, I'm driving this, and Rick's going to help me with this, but what we're going to do is, first of all, explain what the IBB is to those that may not know it, because they've just not seen it. Explain a little bit about the architecture and how it works, and explain a little bit about how the plug and play mechanisms work, and then show it, and then that's it.
And
It's kind of
during that
one of
Tracy, to your point of talking about the value propositions and not just the box. It's kind of, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing here. If people can't get their head around what the value proposition is, it's like, so we've kind of said, okay, forget the chicken and egg thing. We'll go ahead and build the chicken so you can start to understand, you can start to use your imagination around what the value proposition is. Because thinking about what a value proposition is, if there's no way in heck that you can take a first step, because there's no platform, there's no path that's been paved, the value proposition is just theoretical. What we're wanting to say is that here's the Nizanto demos the box and the process and all the code that's been written and the speed for which things can be deployed and built. We will be highlighting the fact that work is done, and now we can start to talk about how the value proposition transfers for all the different stakeholders.
And that leads into a ecosystem panel discussion that Tracy leads, so we can talk about that briefly. But I want to make sure we spend some time on this session with Steve. So we spend like 5 minutes, Tracy, on this.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the ecosystem and who the stakeholders are and how this impacts them. Would be the idea behind this. This is a panel discussion, so I think it will be lively to kind of talk through this, because there are, as I mentioned earlier, competing forces at work here to kind of move all this thing forward. So I'd like to get into that a little bit when we get into this session, but I think this is going to be an interesting discussion, right? Because this is the point at which technology meets business. So don't need to say much more. I'm absolutely welcoming any input or thoughts or points of view or questions that we can bring up in the session to kind of add to it. So
Starting off with those questions, those 5 questions are bulleted, which are in their own quite provocative.
Yeah. I think you might be hard pressed to do it all in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
If you get serious
totally.
about those 5 questions. Yeah.
yeah, you could do a much longer session on this part of it.
Yeah.
the agenda has evolved greatly in the last week, so kudos to everybody that made that happen.
Yeah, it's a collaborative effort here. So
But that's another characteristic of cloud native we're experiencing too on automated buildings, is the whole idea of everybody building their piece and then bringing the pieces together. And the other thing is you can reach out and touch people who are on the same page as you are, who you could not hire because they belong to other companies. But when you start collaborating, all of a sudden it is just truly phenomenal. what can be built in a matter of days. It's just incredible.
So
Yes.
Glenn, collaboration is pretty core in much of what you've been writing about future architectures and future ways of doing business.
Yep.
Yeah, like Mark and I started that way back when, so yeah. It's and
How do you think we have enough of that? Sorry, I was just going to ask Glenn, do you think we have enough of that collaboration conversation here? Because I'm not sure we've used the word up to now. Let's go.
Oh, well, yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I would, yes. I mean, one dimension you might consider is just the nature of the different roles that exist in an ecosystem, and the fact that there are choices and trade-offs between how I collaborate, and you know, definitely a not one size fits all, right? Not everybody can be the central platform that might be organizing this, and so just understanding the nature of the roles and the kinds of contributed value and kinds of shared values, and what good gets wrought from that collaboration, I think would be it's a little bit like what we discussed earlier, just evolution of standards and openness and other sectors of the economy and so forth. Having some good examples of how these kinds of collaboration would occur would be great.
Yeah, it's a good point. And thinking back to what I just said a moment ago, and both of the examples I gave in terms of the auto industry and phones, in both cases, they had a fully vertically integrated, captured provider first that did it first, right? And then people jumped on board. And we're trying to do this as a groundswell, root kind of grassroots effort, and trying to get herd cats in the same direction like this is a little bit harder way to go about this. It'd be much better if we had a 800-pound gorilla leading the way on this.
For sure.
I think the other thing now too is, as the new folks come into the industry, they look at us and they look at you and they say, well, how else would you do it?
True.
They're used to playing online. They're used to cooperating. They basically have lived their whole life already. Their short lives they've lived online, cooperating, interfacing with people they've never seen. And so they're looking at us and it's like, yeah. Explain to me again why you would not do it this way. In fact, I know no other way to do this. So
If
So
we
that's
were
a
to
good
do it-
that's a good segue to the next
Yeah,
segment.
I'll add
exactly.
that.
Thank you,
If we were to
Ken,
do
for
a-
that. You set me up beautifully.
Yeah, if you did a SWOT analysis and all this, one of the opportunities or trends, depending on how you use your O's and your T's, would certainly be what Ken just said in terms of the workforce coming in. We have not only a trend, but an opportunity to really take advantage and use that to move our efforts forward here.
I think one thing people miss is, like, look at all the OEMs now that are moving into software businesses and stumble bumming around trying to figure out how to be in the software business or the software platform business. And to some extent, I think you always need to communicate that the pie gets bigger faster in an ecosystem driven opportunity. The relative returns, the speed of the returns and the scale of the returns are higher. And of course, you bring it back to stock prices and public markets, the valuations tend to come out higher as well. So I think when all else fails, I think the underlying story is look at the economics of this, because eventually, just like the technology, the economics will follow the technology into the space.
Steve.
So I guess 2 points about the workforce. The why do we feel workforce innovation is changing our industry? Well, Ken an hour ago mentioned that his daughter has never used Word. Right? So think about the transition that Ken talked about as well, of going from pneumatics to DDC, and a number of you have also mentioned that. At the time that was going on, we were replacing, pneumatics or even solid state with a microprocessor-based widget. At that time in the early 80s, the average user did not have an experience with computers at all, right? It was really the mid to late 80s before personal computers became somewhat ubiquitous. And it really wasn't until the 90s and so on where schools started having their students start having some sort of computer in the classroom. Okay? Then 20 years ago, smartphones come into the space. Now computing at the user level is everywhere, and it's everything. So in a space of 40 plus years, we've gone from the user community not having access to computing to being driving computing. And to your point, Glenn, the way they're driving computing is almost inherently collaborative in nature. Facebook, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It just keep going from there. It just keeps going, right? So that's why we're making the claim that workforce innovation is changing the OT industry, because whether the users are coming in as somebody who just graduated from tech school or college, or they're software engineers and they're going to work for whomever, including Honeywell and all the major companies. What do these guys know? They're learning the latest in cloud architectures and cloud computing, and so whether it's down in the weeds or on the user experience, we've got to recognize that the landscape has completely changed from the workforce perspective relative to 40 years ago or even 20 years ago, and that's the point we're going to make in this session.
The fact that has, not that it has to change the industry, it is changing the industry. There's no other
it
way.
is. Yeah.
Because an industry is made up of people, and the people are fundamentally changing, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. The people have changed, right? And so the industry's got to respond to that, like it or not.
Again, back to the analogy of DDC what happened is the pneumatic device disappeared and became a line of code, a program. And we're seeing sort of the similar thing with cloud native, that actual physical pieces are disappearing. And so it's gonna radically change. I mean, the way the servers and where this stuff is hosted is going to change. Don't get me wrong, I don't see a thing where we'll not have some device in the building. I mean, there'll always be an on-prem backup control system, but it'll be more in the light of a smart stat that talks very well to the cloud native thing. So you've seen the whole evolution. And then a while back on Monday Live, we had the quick discussion about the telcos are coming. And that's another piece that's going to fit into this, I think. But it's just, it's radical change. Part of the industry is disappearing. So you got to do something about that, because cloud native is replacing that. And once you get your head into cloud native, it's like, oh shit, this is completely different. Oops.
You said a bad word.
Yeah,
It'll get beeped out in the video. So we need to bring this to a close, so wrap this show up. Thank you very much for all the conversation here. Thanks, Glenn, for joining us, and everybody for being with us. And I guess we'll all see each other in Chicago.
Sounds good.
So all good stuff.
Travel safely, and we'll see you guys in less than a week.
Yep.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.
All. Have a great
Everybody,
week as well.
look forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.